Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Here, we look closely at the intersections of the postpartum window, the Ayurvedic perspective on health and healing, and the universal mother principles that are the keys to giving and receiving effective care. Hello, I'm Christine Devlin Eck. I'll be taking you through interviews with professionals who are making a profound difference in the lives of their clients, conversations with individuals brave enough to share their stories of vulnerability as a way to lift up others, and my own journey through birth, parenting, caregiving, and building a conscious business. We are here to honor the sacred windows, the profound transitions in life that give it all meaning. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. It is a pleasure today to welcome Catherine Mapa to our conversation. Catherine is a school social worker, a therapist, a lifelong learner, a curiosity queen. She's a world traveler. Much of her experience and work has been working with neurodiverse populations, trauma, hospice, community mental health, and she is expanding that into working with new families in the postpartum window as well. And Catherine and I are going to be exploring how we, as care providers for families, how can we support families in integrating new babies when siblings are on the spectrum? Catherine also pretty soon will be leading a workshop where we'll be talking more about, when a parent is on the spectrum or neurodiverse. And this is a really important conversation that I don't see enough of. So, Catherine, thank you so much for being here and for your willingness to share.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've never actually done a podcast before, so this is new territory along with, being a part of the postpartum doula program, which I'm really, really enjoying. And yeah, the journey's been really, really fulfilling so far. So
I'm so glad. And I think, for myself and many others who I've resonated with on it, that postpartum window is so reflective of so many other transitional spaces in life. And so once we start learning about how to support people during that window, we're like, oh, and this also seems to help for this, and this also seems to help for this. And I think when we're working with um, neurodiversity, there is a real need for similar care principles that we apply in postpartum. And I guess I'm curious if you've noticed that or if you've been thinking about that in your work. I know you work with young people on a daily basis, and if you found any crossovers so far.
I have actually, it's been really interesting. Kind of, went down a rabbit hole as I often do. But I think especially with the neurodiversity aspect, in particular, autism spectrum and ADHD. There's, other types of, neurodivergent as well. Sometimes people forget that within that like umbrella category, there's bipolar, there's even gender queerness in a way, like just essentially not even how somebody is or that they have deficits or nothing at all. It's just more how their brain operates and how they are as a whole person, essentially. And I think it's been really neat to see how just Ayurveda really matches with like what is needed to help support just a person that needs structure, needs the holistic caring, the whole person like embodiment. And it has been interesting, especially with that piece about learning more about the Ayurvedic principles and um, just the makeup of it, and noticing, well, um, within that, there's safety. Like there's safety within, you're creating safety within the in the doula world, you're creating safety and belonging and trying to, make someone feel whole and cared for. And that's really what people, especially with neurodivergence, are seeking. whether they can explain it or communicate it in the way that, society expects, um, is another story, but it's essentially really the same thing, and it's really beautiful to see, actually.
It is really beautiful to see. I like got a little bit of a chill when you said that because I recognize that. And I think when we bring, there's so many sort of heady things to talk about, but when we really bring it to like that core center of how all the tissue systems respond when someone feels loved, when someone feels cared for and safe, like that's what we're going for at all times.
Yeah, I was thinking about, and this might be a little bit off, but I was thinking especially about that, if you are bringing a new baby into a household, especially with a child that might have a neurodiverse diagnosis or presentation, I'll say. They might not be diagnosed. They just might have some extra sparkle. I like to call it that sometimes. Um, you know, Reassuring, having that structure, making sure that there's, that safety in your body, in your environment, in your belonging, in yourself. So having that routine building, the routines that um, are helpful and structured, having that, some struggle with like, physical cues. That's the other thing too that I've been finding interesting is not being able to communicate those cues, especially noticing like within that kind of neurodivergent vibration that I think of. I think of maybe individuals, maybe more Vata and Pitta, as I was looking at. And I'm no expert by any means. I just have been like a big nerding out on this a little bit, but just noticing that piece and how there's already that um, tendency to be and present in Vata and Pitta, and then having like, what can ground me, what can make me feel calm, and just noticing even the types of food that some individuals choose. I don't know. It's just fascinating.
It
But
is
I
so fascinating. And I think, part of the study of Ayurveda, it's just so beautiful that we're able to incorporate all of the behavioral traits that we do, the way we feel in our body, the way our thought processes go. And so all of this is part of that picture of health, and all of that is so unique to each person. And so that's, I think, when we think of something like trauma-informed care, like when we're really looking at the individual and taking all of their unique aspects of their story and their constitution into play, it's just this real natural, um, just beautifully trauma-informed approach.
Yeah, and talking to friends and colleagues and just experience I've had with, parents, I think the one of the pros and kind of gifts of being neurodivergent is having that attention to detail. Sometimes you don't, right? There's some people, it manifests differently for everyone, but some people, cannot focus attention unless it's something they're very interested in. But when they are, it's a superpower. I mean, even being able to notice patterns in your child, like noticing, like being prepared and being like, oh, I'm noticing this pattern. I've noticed that, he's been really wanting more closeness today, wanting more touch, wanting more pressure. I'm thinking that maybe he's not going to feel well later today. He's not feeling well. And then sure enough, having everything ready to help take care of him when he's, you know, trying to heal whatever stomach bug he has. So just, yeah, having those noticeable patterns, being aware, being ready, even um, knowing your own cues, like before bringing a baby home, or having that transition to that sacred window, whether it's your first child or like bringing a child in with a second, like with an individual that's already, whether it's the child that is neurodiverse or the parent, having those self-soothing skills ready and thinking ahead and being like, what do I already do to like help make my environment more safe and calming and regulated for me?
Yeah. This is we're going to cover a lot of this tonight before we go too deep because you and I are definitely like ready to jump in. I want to like pause because you are a professional in the space. You've worked with many children and families, individuals who experience some presentation of neurodivergence. And I just want to, from your perspective and your background, what are some characteristics of neurodivergence? We've already talked about a few. And how does it impact individuals?
Yeah, and we're not, I know we talk about trauma and and I want to say too to people that are listening, I trauma and autism and ADHD can mimic each other. They can look similar. So some of these things, um, yeah, I can't, you might be experiencing this at home and if you're, yeah, just to say that it might not be if you start to think about like you're sitting here and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm diagnosing myself or something like that. They're all kind of interconnected in a way, and they're not all the same, but they look similar. So, um, some that are pretty common is sensory overload. Too much, it could be smell, it could be noise, it could be environment, it could be the clothes you're wearing, and then all of those things together could just set you off. Like you're all of a sudden noticing like a tick in the clock, or your coffee tumbler is hissing and nobody else can hear it, but you can. And then you can feel your sock and your sock's bugging you. And then something else is happening. And then it all kind of just happens. So that sort of thing. Um, Especially with like baby crying, that's the thing we can get into. Executive functioning. So like working memory, task initiation, organization, freezing. I myself have experienced this. You want to get something done and you cannot. You're staring at it. You can't put your foot forward. You can't think of what to do first to get started. But when you get started, you do pretty well. Sometimes you get sidetracked and distracted. It's hard to focus. What else? Communication styles can really be affected. Communication and social skills. More than not. Most people seek connection. Most people want to be connected. They want to have friends. They want to be loved. They want a relationship, da 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 da. And maybe they can't communicate that in the way in which society expects them to, in a way in which that is effective for them to show that they're interested or show that they want to be friends or initiate. That can be really hard. That can be really, really hard. Lack of urgency. Um, that's, unless it's an emergency, unless it's something that has to be done then, unless there's like fire being held behind you to get something done, it's really hard. Motivation can be hard. So things like that. And then of course, there's often comorbid mental health diagnoses. When your brain is kind of takes detours and gets to the same conclusion that everybody else does, but maybe takes a different direction, it can feel really daunting. And people, the society, again, I'm going to say, the world is not built for, for them. I'm saying that in quotes, unfortunately, the way that it runs. So that can really be a struggle as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you said that too of there's just so many unique ways that people may experience different aspects of these um characteristics, and also I think bringing a little bit, just reminding us of that Ayurvedic piece. So much of it is involved with our constitution and our, the elements and how we have this unique balance in our body. And that also dictates so much of the different types of expressions of these, um, uh, yeah, that each person will experience. And so, when we're thinking about, yeah, like you mentioned, society just is not necessarily set up. I'm thinking of particularly for school. Two of my four children have different expressions, and my partner as well. And school is not really set up for alternative learners. And so as a parent navigating the school system, it's been everywhere from like feeling really defeated and emotional as a parent to feeling um there's a whole spectrum as a parent that we navigate too when we're supporting our children. And so, and I was thinking before our talk, like I remember being, maybe a teenager, and when I would hear, or a child, and when I would hear like the word ADHD, to me, like without the context, and I think with the stigma that maybe used to have more than I think it does now, there was like a real, almost like, oh, that must be really bad. And I was reflecting on how, having two children and a partner who navigate different expressions of this and other diagnoses, there's so much beauty and strength to it. And I want to also like get your ideas and thoughts around, yes, we can see these challenges, but there's also tremendous strengths that even go beyond, that absolutely go beyond. I have two other children who, are pretty traditional learners and don't have this diagnosis, but there's huge strengths that go along with that.
Yeah. I think about, again, the attention to detail, pattern recognition. I think passionate advocates is another thing. If someone is super interested in, mutual aid, I think of that because I'm in Minneapolis and there's been a lot happening here. But mutual aid, any type of cause or enthusiasm or passion you have, like that is so focused on, and they know everything about it. And I think that's really beautiful as well. Resourceful. I think, a lot of times I'll work with students or people that will come in here and they'll just be defeated because yeah, they're in school, they are told to focus, they already can't focus. So you tell them to focus and then they get more anxious because they can't, or maybe their individualized education plan with good intention, right? Tells them that they, it says that they have the accommodation of sitting in the front. Well, maybe sitting in the front is not going to be helpful because they think everybody's watching them. They think everybody's looking at their back and they can't see and have the door in view so they can feel like they can move. But essentially just within that, I remind them that like you've had to, without knowing, you've had to develop survival skills and be resourceful when you're not, because everybody else, again, in quotes, seems to, in your eyes, maybe know what's going on, have it together, can do well, are not feeling like there's butterflies exploding from your chest. And you have to adapt. And you have, whether it's worked well or not, you have. And so the survival skills is a big one. And then just artistic creators can be more accepting and compassionate for others because they know and have experienced whether it's bias or discrimination or just those extra challenges. And then athleticism. I know sometimes it's hard with motor stuff, but athleticism is another one because moving is huge to keep regulated. So
Yeah, I love that. That. So let's like move a little bit into when we're thinking about bringing a baby home, like expanding your family. And I know that like for me, going from one to two was the hardest transition. I think like I healed well in different ways, but that learning to balance multiple people when all my attention previously had been on my older child only was a really big deal. And so when we add that layer of maybe our older child is neurodivergent in some way, how can we think about preparing our home, preparing ourselves, preparing our child? Let's talk about that a little bit.
yeah, and it's funny. My best friend has two kids, and she just had a baby in December, and then her oldest is 3, and just had a big incident this morning, actually. So just thinking right now, in general, you may have just the normal toddler, normal development happening when you bring in a new baby, but then you add like neurodivergence, it can be even more. You have to even be even more mindful sometimes. So when you find out and when you're ready, I would start talking early to your child, letting them know in like simple terms, or in a way, maybe not, maybe you don't have to use simple terms, but in a way that they'll understand like what's happening. Mom has a baby in her tummy. Whoever's carrying the baby, there is a baby coming in. Maybe you're adopting, there is a child coming in. Having, practicing within routines. There's already going to be routines probably in most households, whether you have a neurodivergent child or not. But those routines and structures, they like um, they like to know what's happening, and there's control in that. There's follow through. There's it's not unpredictable, and that's helpful. So like being able to practice and let them know that the schedule might change, having visuals, having a social story, putting your child into the social story and being like, I use Ralph because my dad likes that name. I don't know. Ralph is gonna be a big brother. This is what's gonna happen. This is where the baby will sleep. Sometimes the baby will cry. Just things like that. So talking about that, giving maybe your child a job right away to help them and know that they're going to be excited about this. Um, Having them help prepare the room, prepare the nursery, go shopping with you, showing you things. Sometimes if they can't see it, they don't know. So even having a doll to help them learn how to hold a baby or how to treat another little child. Maybe showing them photos of the hospital. Just all of these things, being very well aware of like, so they have as much knowledge as they can have to prepare because it sometimes takes a really long time. Um, I have a person I worked with, and this is just not necessarily related to babies, but just an example. He lost his house in a fire, his family, a couple years ago. He still is really struggling. You have your routine, and if you've been in it for years, it can take longer sometimes, especially with the way that you kind of take detours. Um, I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry. What else? I think if you have a child that is sensitive to noise, because actually crying and really loud noises, or even the face that is made when people cry, can be really upsetting, especially to some people that identify with a diagnosis of autism. So starting small, playing a little bit of crying sounds, and then moving into like maybe while they're playing or doing an activity they like, and preparing them. Or like,
Too, if like, giving them I'm loving all of these ideas so much and I find it fascinating, but I also wonder if like having like a pair of noise canceling like ear protectors, just like these are yours. If the baby's ever bothering you while you're playing or while you're reading or coloring and you don't like it, these are for you and you can decide if you want to wear them. Like just knowing that they have these tools to make themselves comfortable because babies, they can be a lot and they demand attention sometimes. And yeah.
even having them decorate their own headphones, because headphones are not always, sometimes they hurt. I wore them yesterday for an exam and they hurt, but I wore them. But maybe getting some buy-in that way. Making sure that you are trying, it's hard, right? But making sure you are trying to keep like intentional one-to-one time with your child that you already have. So that they know that they have not been forgotten, that they know that you're there, that they're sure of you, essentially. Because that's helpful to still have that predictability and know of you being there.
I love that. Yeah, I remember, during that sacred window, what I was able to do was so different, and so we created different routines. So like every evening, my older ones would just come in bed with me and we would read and we would talk and we would listen to music and we just had our time and my partner would take the baby. And yeah, it wasn't kind of the same like active up and about type of activities that we were used to, but I was able to have that time and it was doable. How are you sharing your gifts and passion for caregiving with others? In a world where education and awareness around the postpartum window is lacking or missing from our modern systems, we have a profound opportunity to shift that paradigm. You may be a few simple offerings away from making a truly impactful difference in the lives of mothers and families in your community. We are here to support your journey in the ways that work best for you. Schedule a conscious care strategy session to meet one on one with me, and let's identify the right next step for you to begin a path of conscious care for new families that fits your life and your needs. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session to schedule a time that works best for you. That's www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session.
Yeah, and I just thought of another thing too that is it kind of just plopped in here, but to the point of, I know, if your toddler in general, if they want your attention, they're going to vie for it, right? They're going to want it. They want to be connected to you. And that's important. And also with some, especially with neurodivergence, it's that reassurance of that co-regulation. It's maybe not necessarily that they want you specifically and they're like acting out to be with you because they're mad about the baby. They might be, right? And they need you to co-regulate with them. They can't do that by themselves sometimes. They need help learning how to do it. Same with most children, I suppose. But yeah, so just that remembrance of like co-regulating is really important.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. Like, what is an example of how someone can do that, like co-regulate with their child, maybe who's going through a rough moment?
So you can model breath and breathing, like slower breathing, or even and kind of just maybe overemphasize it a little bit. And it can help soothe you as well to kind of match and bring your body energy down. Talking in a softer voice. Um, Less is more. Less is more. Sometimes we get really in our feels, or as my little goddaughter says, fifis, right? So if you get too much in your fifis, sometimes you talk a lot. And then you're like trying to give directives and like you're maybe worried about your child, but also upset. And then your child is dysregulated and upset. They're not going to hear you. They're
Yeah.
not going to hear you at that point. So just, I think, sign language, visuals, um, less is much more. Because your IQ drops. Your IQ drops at least, it's proven. I don't remember the amount. I'm going to throw one out there. I'm just going to say this is not like maybe like 4 points when you're like out of your threshold, when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're anxious, like when you're in those heightened states, it's gone. So they're not going to hear you.
Right. We're using like a different part of the brain. And this is fascinating. So, I think when we already have, so I think this is actually a really huge part, and I think it's so beautiful how complementary it is for postpartum healing in general. It comes just back so brightly to me of how important it is to prepare ahead of time. Um, and so when we create routines for our children, it's automatically an opportunity to be creating routines for ourselves and thinking about, and I know I told you that I'm going to be talking more about this at the NAMA conference coming up, but there's this opportunity for parents to really harness their own regulation and their own mental health and their own, in Ayurveda, like we can't really separate all the different areas of health. They're so intertwined. And so thinking about food routines, thinking about rest routines, thinking about, um, of course, like nervous system nourishment, and also, finding, I think, particularly with, when maybe children are older and things start to become a bit more um, heady and structured in our time, and like creating space for play. I feel like creating space for openness, and how that impacts mental regulation and emotional regulation. I just find so much beauty in how we can really be supporting ourselves as parents at the same time as we're trying to create these routines for our children. So rather than it feeling like, okay, now I have all this extra stuff I have to do, it's actually like, how do we simplify and really create this structure that we all mutually benefit from?
No, absolutely. And thinking too that, along with the mother, right? Or like the main caregiver, I suppose, you have your co-caregiver who often, and I'm prefacing this with often men are diagnosed more. Often that comes up, especially with ADHD. But they already, it's hard. I think there's that intersectionality of being identifying as a male and then having that neurodivergent diagnosis and then already struggling there and then taking on this they might already have trouble parsing out their role in general as a new father, as a new caregiver. And then so yeah, the sleep piece, the finding time and not, I think Ayurveda gives that unique opportunity within that sacred window too of so you don't lose your identity within being a parent, within being a caregiver. So you can still, you know, it feels selfish, but it really isn't, right? Like you putting your oxygen mask on first, essentially, like keeping the parts of you and not totally losing it within that caregiving experience. Super
Oh,
important.
completely. Yeah, yeah. And that's really what this type of care is all about, is really caring for the parent so that the parent is regulated and supported for the children. And so I'm thinking about, as postpartum care providers, we get this opportunity to like support families through the preparation process. Hopefully, if we get to work with a family before their baby arrives, what are, some ways that that can look like for the care provider or for, yeah, for the doula or for the person who's, supporting the family?
Oh, like self-care for us. Yeah.
Well, I think yes, but I'm thinking also like, yeah, okay, so I'm going to be working with this family and, this is, um, I think across the board, like we're doing this for everyone, regardless or not, if there's a neurodivergent older child or anybody, like I think it's all helpful for every person. But I'm thinking about, and I think we're just going to kind of creatively explore. And I'm sure there's folks listening out there who do have solid postpartum preparation type services in their practice already. But thinking just of, from your background of how is it helpful for people to create routines with help from, maybe it's a therapist or maybe it's whoever, but we're kind of in this role of facilitating routines, like helping people get them going. So what are you, when you think of that, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think of if especially I think it is good because couples do, it's good, especially bringing a second child into the house, having kind of a couples therapy, right? Kind of. That's weird. That's not what I meant. But you know what I'm saying. Having couples therapy, and preparing, looking at maybe again what your motivations are, what your values are, come together in that essence, and then finding how what might you do like what you already do for self-soothing, like I said, what you already enjoy about the freedom you have right now. So like let's say you go mountain biking every day. That might have to adjust a bit, but that keeps you regulated. That keeps you feeling healthy. It keeps your mental health going. You like to be in the fresh air. You still make an effort, even a contract. I'm not really saying you don't have to do a contract essentially, but it could be a commitment to yourself, right? The things that you know that you want to keep and that are important. Even scheduling, like even within your exhaustion and the la locura, like the madness of reining in the wildness of child care and being new parents. I think making a date night, like trying to have a date night or like a date 30 minutes, like whether it's to play a game or sit quietly together or enjoy something that you did together before that you continue to do together. Making sure that you both, maybe having a sleep schedule. Because if you also like within the hierarchy of need, add ADHD to that or anything else, sleep, you don't have sleep, you're toast. It really is hard and it makes it even more challenging. So just I think, yeah, having rituals ready, remembering why you're together, why you decided to be in this family unit together, and holding those things really sacredly also.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful opportunity, for the doula to come in with some questions. Like we get this opportunity to really get to know a family, and the asking those questions and having those open conversations together of, you know, what are the things that really help you to feel resilient and rested and calm? And then when we know those things, we can kind of reverse engineer the plan so that those things are always there. What has to happen in order for that to be protected? Maybe that's these are the people who I feel comfortable being with my baby or my child, when I'm doing these things, and having this support system ready. Um, is so important, and interestingly, it sounds so basic, but so many times that's skipped.
Yeah. And having the uncomfortable conversation too, like even bringing up onto the other end, like what about you do you know that's gonna maybe like what is frustrating for you? Like what throws you off? What is gonna come up that you think that maybe happened before or that has happened in different situations that could be similar? Um, how how do you manage that? And how would you manage that on less sleep? How would you manage that under stress, when you maybe can't, when you're trying to fulfill a role that, um, within your family unit that you don't usually do or have to do, but then you need to because the other person is they don't have the spoons, right? So even talking about that and still keeping, yeah, just finding those balances.
Right, and setting up ahead of time the tools and the strategies to pull out when inevitably there are going to be moments where we're frustrated or we're dysregulated or we're overtired or we're emotional, when those strategies are practiced and available. Yeah, yeah, it's huge. It's a game changer. Again, like it points to the universal human experience of wanting to be safe, wanting to be loved, wanting to be, um, yeah, in connection and in community in a safe way. Um, yeah, this is so beautiful. And so, as we um, seek to create practices that really offer support, actually, this brings up, and maybe I'm sure this is a larger context, but I do want to bring it up because we don't have the privilege of working with families all the time during their pregnancy. We don't always get the opportunity to understand who they are and all of these things beforehand. And sometimes we're called into a care situation where there's a lot going on that feels imbalanced, that feels dysregulated, and that of course, for the person, but also for the care provider, this is like just a lot. And so I guess, from your perspective, is there anything that you would recommend, a course of action, for someone who's entering into a care situation that they feel unprepared to fully handle?
Yeah, I think be curious. I think if you walk in and you are like just floored with you like, oh, I can't do this, or you're feeling like, yeah, overwhelmed, you don't know where to start, give yourself an opportunity to just say like in your head or out loud, just like be curious, like ask questions, do some observing when you go in. Like and I think most doulas are good at that, right? You've learned how to do that. But then maybe triaging a little bit as well. Kind of maybe even taking stock of the way that I remember, I'm really pulling this, but I remember listening to another one that you had done about style and aesthetic and the way that a room is. And, maybe looking at how the room is set up and looking at noticing maybe they have pictures on the wall of music they like or the type of records that are out. And just kind of gleaning information from that as you come in. You could even like if it's a like really stressful situation, you can remove one person maybe right away. Take them to another space, talk to them. Yeah, maybe the older child is crying and having a really hard time, and maybe the baby's upset, and maybe mom is having a hard time, and then dad or co-caregivers like just deer in headlights. Maybe you whisk them away and start there. But definitely like assessing the situation, I would say, and finding something that you can um, start building rapport with.
Right, right. And in terms of like that idea of a community net, um, and we talk about this a lot in the program and how we train postpartum care providers of you need to have your resource and referral guide. And so when we're working with neurodivergent families, who are the important people that we want to know in the community that can come and step in? Because obviously most of us are not going to be mental health professionals. Some of
Yeah.
us will be, but who are those folks?
Yeah, I think if families haven't tapped into ECFE, is that something that they have all over? I should know this. ECFE is an early childhood program, connecting them with that programming so that they have that if needed.
It's called different things in different places. We have that here, but it's under a different name. Yeah.
So doing that, I think, making sure, I have, acupuncture available, having massage available, having different therapists available on a resource list too, depending on the situation. And it doesn't even have to be therapy necessarily. It could be sometimes we have walk-in clinics if there's something that's needed, or even um, um, like I'm also thinking of, depending on the situation, maybe there's a struggle to, there's already been maybe a struggle to kind of, strike a balance in the household, and there's new behaviors that have shown up that are really hard. Maybe have sometimes in-home kind of behavior and brainstorming. Consultants will come in and can help with that. Just having family or really good friends that, like you had said earlier, that you know and trust to come in and just provide time and space for you. Um, yeah, and I can think of some more too, but those are the ones that I think of right away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'll also say too that um, any kind of group where people are coming together with their milk-stained clothes and their exhaustion and their, hair that hasn't been combed and like just a place to like be with others who are also navigating many of the same things that you are. Being in community with others in that way is hugely supportive.
Validation of that. And even I think, and to that point, maybe you do have, I have a friend who, she had said for a while she was, you really can't diagnose, there's not a diagnosis of autism. Like the earliest that happens is like 18 months to 24 months. So it doesn't happen before that. But if there's like a very distinctive, like if it's, yep, that's what it is. She had that happen. And she felt really, she learned that like, um, it's okay to like not be okay, to go to her group and see like people are like, oh, my kid is fussy sometimes too. We had a fussy night. And that was really hard for her, I think, to be like, oh, well, you just had a fussy night. Like every day, all the time is really hard right now. So like trying to be, knowing, and now she knows, but knowing that going to this and having that validation, but also being, knowing that you can say and be open and raw and be like, nope, this is actually my reality and this is what's happening. But even finding a group, maybe then a different group, right? That might be more accepting or feel more comfortable and relatable to. We have the Autism Society in Minnesota here that provides a lot of programming. But yeah, like specific programming for neurodivergent families and resources. Um, and yeah, I think being able to just like you said, fall apart, show up, know that you're not like alone and you're not um just unstable and, grasping for straws. Like it's happening for a lot of people, and it is hard. It is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And we have all of these things that ideally, which we talked so much about, of being able to set up nourishing routines. And there's so much more, that we won't be able to cover today, but, really looking into the nutrition aspect of how that supports attention and all of, creates balance within all of these expressions of different, for people with different expressions of neurodivergent diagnoses. But I also think a whole nother conversation is really looking at Ayurveda and the mind and how the different doshas present. And while we can't go super deep into this, I do feel like one, nugget of inspiration and maybe like a fun thing for all of us to do as we, move on with our day after listening to this conversation is like being able to bring it back to the qualities in nature, bringing it back to that air, space, fire, water, earth, and seeing those different elements come into our moods, our mind, like, oh, all of a sudden, like, you mentioned earlier, like that feeling of like butterflies, like bursting out of your chest, like that is like air and space. It's like light, it's frenetic movement, and it's, that feels really disruptive in a way. And so looking at, okay, like, how can I settle that? How can I bring that solid, strong quality of earth into my body to help create a regulated experience from that. Um, Maybe that like hotness of like agitation we might feel with like all those different like sensory things are like nonstop, and we're just there's a fire that's sort of erupting in that moment. And how can we like bring some coolness, like that cool water, like bring that quality in. And all of those things are so accessible in every moment, to be honest. Like we can go and just like run our wrists under cold water for a minute.
Yeah.
Like I always do that in the summer. If I'm like overheated, I'll just go put my wrists under water, and like all of a sudden, like you just start to feel everything cool down. So yeah, just noticing how those elements start to, you know, express themselves in an unbalanced way, and what are the ways that you can in that moment do that. I'm curious if you have your own um, things that come to mind in that topic.
Yeah, I do think we could talk about this forever because I do think digestion is so interesting too, and just even the diet habits of some of my population I work with, and how it could interfere or like help balance the dosha, um, and the Agni and things like that. So I for sure temperature, there's really accessible things. I like to teach accessible things, and so to, within the doula practice, that's very apparent as well, like for families to use. But yeah, the temperature, changing the temperature, splashing your face with water, opening your freezer door and just putting your face in the freezer. I have a habit at autism camp when I go, because I work in the summer, to go stand in the cooler. If I'm like upset or I'm like on the verge, they know if I'm in the cooler, I'm regulating myself. Um, Really heavy, like intense exercise in the moment. Whether it's push-ups, sometimes if I have a student that's like really, or someone that's really struggling and just has this energy, maybe we'll do push-ups. Maybe I'll have them do a wall sit, maybe a burpee, maybe crouching and like just pushing as hard as you can into the floor, to like move that energy out of your hands kind of into the roots of the floor, I say. Um, Paced breathing, that can be really helpful, that co-regulating of breathing. Touch, sometimes like, more often than not, I mean, everybody prefers different touch, but I've found more often than not, deep pressure is less alerting for the, I can't even think of my words right now, nervous system. So deep pressure. is really helpful. Hand squeezes. Teaching someone to, if they don't feel comfortable having you near them, teaching someone to do it themselves, putting on some hand lotion. Um, putting, you can take your hand and put one hand on your forehead and back here behind your neck. That's really regulating. Often people will sit like this. I don't know if anyone can see me, but they'll sit with their hands kind of laced, fingers laced and kind of butterflied with your elbows out the back of your head. That's just within itself, it addresses the vagal system and calms you down.
I love
Um,
that.
well, just really accessible things can be done. Like swaying, it's another thing.
Ah, yeah, yeah. I love that movement of just like standing and kind of letting your arms flop to either side as you move. I love that. I find
Dancing it out in a moment.
oh, dancing it out, hugging it
Yep.
out.
Yep.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, just the food thing is so interesting. I know we don't necessarily have time for all that, but I do think of that and how, there's different types of food, often gluten, there's this study that people have followed often, like a gluten-free diet can help with the neurofiring and helps with seizures, is what people have been looking at. So a lot of people I work with, they try to lower their gluten intake because of seizures. And then that can be hard because the food preferences often are beige for a lot of our friends. So it's hard to kind of, do the food therapy and find different ways that maybe they'll like it. Maybe they'll want cold pizza or they like hot pizza better or they like, it depends. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a whole other part too that maybe we'll be able to hop into at some point, Catherine. But I feel so grateful to have this conversation with you. And I feel really excited about the ways that we as postpartum care providers have this beautiful opportunity to create rhythm that doesn't end in benefit for a neurodivergent child. It really is, again, looking at the whole family, how each person really helps to care for one another. Even I think children really do care for their parents in lots of unseen ways. So I just appreciate you and the work that you're doing and the population you serve and all the families that you have to serve in the future as well.
yeah, and I'll just say really quickly, the easy way becomes the hard way and the hard way becomes the easy way. And so just reminding it can be it's really even though it's daunting and feels hard, but putting forth the structure, working hard to come up with those things, it really is worth it, and it makes your life hopefully easier when we implement those things and work hard at first. So with the strategies, but yes, I really enjoyed chatting and hopefully people are able to follow because sometimes I and my own neurodivergence kind of go all over the place. So it's been a
I
pleasure.
loved it and it was hugely beneficial. And I guess I'm just curious for myself as well. And maybe it's an invitation for all of us to find a routine or a moment where we can create a structure that helps support us. I can already implement one. I already know exactly what I need to create a structure around in my own life. So maybe that's coming up for you. But Catherine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in-person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care.